Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it becomes. If an inferiority is conscious, one always has a chance to correct it. But if it is repressed and isolated from consciousness, it never gets corrected, and is liable to burst forth suddenly in a moment of unawareness. At all counts, it forms an unconscious snag, thwarting our most well-meant intentions. Carl Jung identified two types of shadows: the personal shadow, the unknown dark side of our personality, and the collective shadow, the unknown dark side of society. The personal shadow. Jung describes the personal shadow as the thing a person has no wish to be. It represents unknown or little-known attributes and qualities of the ego, the sum of all those unpleasant qualities we prefer to hide from ourselves. The shadow contains inferiorities that everyone possesses but prefers not to acknowledge, as they seem weak, socially unacceptable, or even evil. The shadow becomes most visible when we are gripped by anxiety or other intense emotions. Under the influence of alcohol or stress, we might suddenly blurt out a hostile remark during what was meant to be a friendly conversation. When we refuse to assimilate what we despise about ourselves, we project it onto others. While it's possible to become acquainted with our shadow and maintain partial conscious control over it, many people completely refuse to recognize their shadow. In such cases, the ego remains unaware of shadow behavior and has no possibility of controlling it. Under these conditions, the shadow operates autonomously and may express itself through inexplicable moods, irritability, and cruelty. The positive aspects of shadow work. Although the shadow is usually perceived as negative, it can also contain positive elements. Jung emphasized that exploring our shadow gives us access to many valuable qualities. The shadow displays a number of good qualities, such as normal instincts, appropriate reactions, realistic insights, creative impulses, etc. Marie-Louise von Franz, one of Jung's closest collaborators, wrote, "The shadow is not necessarily always an opponent. In fact, he is exactly like any human being with whom one has to get along, sometimes by giving in, sometimes by resisting, sometimes by giving love, whatever the situation requires. The shadow becomes hostile only when he is ignored or misunderstood. When we leave these qualities unexplored, we experience impoverishment in our personality, creating unconscious obstacles that inhibit the growth and embodiment of dormant positive qualities within our psyche. For instance, someone might believe that being assertive equals being rude or aggressive. This person loses access to confidence and the ability to speak up honestly and respectfully, which may lead to reduced initiative, difficulty obtaining raises or promotions, and financial struggles. When encountering assertive people, this person feels deep resentment and guilt, making their shadow blacker and denser. The process of shadow work. We encounter our shadow in dreams, typically represented by a person of the same sex as the dreamer. This serves as inner criticism from the unconscious, an internal judge that reproaches us, usually resulting in embarrassed silence. We must identify the contents of our shadow and integrate them into our personality through what Jung called the realization of the shadow or shadow work. This begins a painful and lengthy process of self-education, what Jung described as long and difficult negotiations with the shadow, psychological work equivalent to the labors of Hercules. Shadow work involves observing our shadow both outwardly by watching our emotional reactions and being radically honest about our interactions with others, and inwardly by exploring our dreams. This process brings enlightenment and reduces the shadow's destructive potential, not by waging war against darkness, but by bringing darkness to light and light to darkness. As Jung wrote, "There is no light without shadow, and no psychic wholeness without imperfection." We must not strive for perfection, but rather for wholeness of personality. The lifelong process of individuation creates balance between conscious and unconscious realms, aligning the ego with the self, the totality of our personality. However frightening it may be to confront our shadow, finding truth brings relief. Discernment of truth is the process of authenticity, a painstaking excavation into the depths of our being to explore possibilities and limitations, distortions, and the buried, often forgotten parts of ourselves and our abilities. The collective shadow. The shadow can also stem from sources outside individual personal life, leading us to the collective shadow, the dark or unknown aspects of society and culture. It consists of that which opposes our shared and collective values. The collective shadow encompasses the immense harm inflicted by humans upon each other and the natural world, along with the vast aftereffects of such harm across generations. We find it in projections of darkness and inferiority, in violence and oppression, in the invisibility of current suffering, and in denial of current responsibility. While collective shadow material may manifest brutally in wars, massacres, and genocides, it may also hide beneath attractive facades of missionary activity, such as mandating particular languages and Orwellian reality we experience today. The collective shadow manifests outwardly in atrocities, persecution, physical suffering, sickness, poverty, malnutrition, alcoholism, crime, and the death of cultures. It may also manifest inwardly through hatred toward oneself, one's heritage and culture, depression, feelings of impotence, and desires for revenge. Responding to evil and taking responsibility. The collective shadow represents what has historically been labeled evil. In Christian tradition, it would be the devil. Someone possessed by evil loses their human quality and acquires a demonic nature. Jung believed our primary response to evil must be the quest for self-knowledge and wholeness, which requires assimilating shadow material. Individuals must know relentlessly how much good he can do and what crimes he is capable of. When society denies, projects, and lacks individual and collective responsibility for known issues, these become shadow issues. Taking responsibility morally, politically, and spiritually is crucial. The courage with which we bear our darkness frees others from having to carry it for us. Dealing with massive historical suffering requires more than denial or attempts to get on with things and put the past behind us. Public apologies, repentance, reparations, and pilgrimages are important, but true healing requires deep and broad integration of the shadow throughout populations, not merely symbolic gestures by leaders. Truth-telling is both the most desirable and feasible way to grapple with difficult pasts. Any successful process requires that pain, outrage, betrayal, and suffering be voiced and heard, and that responsibility be taken. Personal and collective integration. Nazi Germany exemplifies terrible mass psychosis driven by the collective shadow, where people fell into demonic behavior through their personal shadows, joining the Nazi party and committing acts they never could have imagined under normal conditions. The personal shadow serves as a bridge to the collective shadow. Therefore, it's essential to resolve our inner conflicts, our personal shadow first, so we don't unconsciously fall into the collective shadow. Only then can we influence others and improve society as a whole. As one mindfulness teacher observed, if we practice mindfulness, we will know how to look deeply into the nature of war and, with our insight, wake people up so that together we can avoid repeating the same horrors again and again. The war is in us, but is also in everyone. Everything is ready to explode, and we are all co-responsible. We must first acknowledge our personal shadow and enter into honest, difficult negotiations, with it being truthful with ourselves and in our interactions with others, watching our emotional reactions and exploring our dreams. This prevents us from becoming passive victims of our shadow and unconscious projections, allowing us to rescue the valuable qualities lying dormant within us, improving our lives and the lives of those around us. With this foundation, we can consciously recognize the collective shadow without falling prey to it. We can take responsibility to address denial and lack of initiative around important issues. The courage to bear our darkness brings relief to others, as truth-telling is the most effective way to deal with difficult pasts, rather than dismissing atrocities and allowing the shadow to grow until history inevitably repeats itself.